Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. Hey, we only do this when there's only breaking news. We'll call it our breaking news breakdown here on Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy CJ Vogel, and the newest member of the On Texas Football family. I like to call him family too. My man Jeff Howe is joining us as well. We're talking about the big news. It was reported earlier today that indeed Blake Gideon, and congratulations, by the way, or in order to Blake Gideon. I got some love for Blake Gideon, a fellow number 21 on the 40 acres, that he is set to be hired by Georgia Tech as their new defensive coordinator. That was reported by Matt Zenitz earlier today. So that means the Longhorns will be looking for a new safeties coach on the back end. Now, we talked about this. This is first world problems. When your program is doing really well, others want to copy what you're doing and they want to poach from your staff. So Sarkis did a really good job of replacing a lot of coaches who have moved on and been promoted and have been poached by other programs. So first, let's talk about it, guys. Blake Gideon, a part of really, I think, one of the greatest, I'm going to call it one of the greatest redemption stories in college football history. Now, I'm talking about the secondary from Texas because I got this stat, and I remember throwing it out there earlier this season, so I'll bring it back up. So if you go look at, this is as far back as I could go. I went back 25 years, basically, but that's as far back as I could go. If you go look at the last 25 years, you can make the argument that the Texas secondary, because they ended the season as the number one pass defense in the country, and in 2023, they ended that season as the 116th ranked pass defense. You could make the argument that it is the greatest transformation, turnaround for a pass defense from season to season in recent college football history. I couldn't go back, more than 25 years, but there has not been a greater turnaround. Nobody has gone from triple-digit ranked pass defense to the number one ranked pass defense in a season, in just one season. We've never seen that happen, at least in the last 25 years. I'll give a lot of credit to Blake Gideon, of course, Terry Joseph and PK for that, but that was a hell of a turnaround. To me, that is the stat that really sums up the accomplishment of that secondary this season.
Yeah, it was. We talked all offseason, Rod. It was going to be a referendum year for Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon just because of the struggles the secondary had last year, especially the last impression of that group was the Sugar Bowl against Washington where Michael Penix went off. And I think it was another year in the system for those guys. I think it was, maybe things were late. The ability of TJ and Blake to maybe get the information across a little bit easier because guys were more familiar with it. The addition of Andrew Makuba to that safety room was, you can't quantify a healthy Andrew Makuba, the impact he made. But, for Blake Gideon in that position, Michael Taft had an All-American season. Andrew Makuba played like one at times. We saw Jelani McDonald's game go to another level. So, yeah, you credit those guys, but Blake Gideon deserves some credit for that. And it's interesting, Rod, when guys come back to their alma mater, specifically guys at Texas, we've seen it, Anthony Johnson, Major Applewhite, Tom Herman. It doesn't always go well when you come back to your alma mater, but Blake Gideon can at least leave Texas going to Georgia Tech knowing that he left that safety room in a better place than when he found it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the takeaway is, look, Texas, for whatever reason, safety spot over the past few years, it's been a rocky road, and I think he at least stabilized the ship and set it on course for what will be a pretty bright future, right? You mentioned some of those names, but you look at the 7 guys that they've got in that room right now. Michael Taft, second-team All-American. We loved what we saw from Jelani McDonald, and we know Derek Williams is a heck of a football player when healthy, of course. But then you got 2 freshmen that are coming into year 2 in 2025 with Jordan Johnson-Rubel, Xavier Phil-Sami as well. There's very high hopes for both of them, right? Phil-Sami had 5 stars next to his name coming out of high school in McKinney, and we don't even really need to talk about the freshman class coming in, already arriving on campus at the moment. But Zealous Hicks and Jonah Williams, it's hard to get more excited about a tandem or a position group on the campus right now than the 2 of them. And when you look at that room and its health and its totality with those 7 players, whoever gets this job is going to be walking into what I call the treasure trove, because I think this room is going to be as special as just about anybody else on the campus at the moment. When you look at the bodies, the talent, the size, and the physical traits that come with playing that position, whoever gets the job is going to be pretty pleased, I think, when they walk in day one to Moncrief and say, oh, this is what I'm working with. All right, sign me up.
Yeah, a couple of things you guys brought up that really just made me think about how impressive this turnaround was to the secondary. Michael Taft and what he represents. I mean, we could be talking about the greatest walk-on football story in Texas football history, because it ain't over yet, but it's certainly in that conversation considering what he accomplished last year. And Blake Gideon, big part of that as the safeties coach. There was some adversity. I mean, they had injuries back there, losing a guy like Derek Williams, and having some injuries. Makuba got injured for a little while, and yet you did not see any drop off in that secondary. Guys were able to step up and still make make plays, even as guys who weren't necessarily the frontline starters. So I'll give Blake Gideon a ton of credit, man. He doesn't get enough credit for what he accomplished as a player on the 40 acres, because some of y'all still talking trash on Blake Gideon because he dropped some interception in the Tech game, but nobody wants to bitching that we had Michael Crabtree double teamed, all right, by 2 NFL defensive backs, and yet they still let him walk into the end zone. But nobody's mad at those guys. They still will be mad at Blake Gideon because he dropped the interception. Started more games than any other DB in the history of DBU, ladies and gentlemen. All right. And Earl Thomas would even tell you, hey, a lot of them accolades that Earl Thomas got, Blake Gideon did a lot to put him in the right position, because he was the one as kind of the air traffic controller back there in that secondary back then. So we owe a lot to Blake Gideon and what he accomplished on the 40 acres, not only as a player, but just speaking as a coach too. So let's talk about Sark replacing coaches, because he's done a good job. In Sark we trust when it comes to hiring coaches. A lot of people were very critical of the Kenny Baker hire after losing what he said was the best D-line coach in all of football in Bo Davis, and we've been more than pleasantly surprised by what Kenny Baker was able to do, replacing a guy like Brennan Marion. And actually had multiple coaches that he had to replace at the wide receiver position, but Chris Jackson has been stellar with those wide receivers, and they've done a good job. Matthew Golden being a primary example of that. Running backs coach, we know it's George Choice, one of the best, if not the best running backs coach in all of the country. So when Sark has to replace, and obviously Jeff Choate moving on, and then bringing in Johnny Nansen and his impact. So when Sark has to replace a coach, done a damn good job of it. What are you guys' thoughts about where he starts? Because for me, I'll just throw out my favorite candidate, and I guess we'll all throw out our favorites and kind of go through a list of names. Y'all know I'm partial to Coach Akina, who was one of the architects of rebuilding DBU. He's now in Arizona as a defensive coordinator, so that wouldn't be easy to get him, but there are roots, deep roots here at Texas with him. And hell, Blake Gideon is a disciple of obviously Coach Akina and what he did here on the 40 acres. So that's my number one, I think, candidate to throw out there. And I think Texas should, obviously shoot for the stars here. Make a candidate, even as a top-notch candidate like a Coach Akina, make them tell you no. And I guarantee you, I can vouch that Coach Akina would seriously consider it. I know he would. He's got that much love for Texas. Anytime Texas reaches out, he's going to seriously consider it because of the roots he has here. That's my number one guy. What say you?
It's hard to hear Coach Akina and not think, yeah, it's a perfect fit, right? And again, that going back to the prime DBU days, Rod, all too well what that was like on the 40 acres when he was here. It makes all the sense. Come back to Austin, lead that resurrection back to that DBU. Texas just basically planted the seeds with the Thorpe Award winner. Now let's see if you can sustain that right now. One name that I like, and I don't know directly if there's ties to Sarkisian, but look, Jimmy Lake and Pete Kwiatkowski go back at Washington, right? He was a guy that Texas, or at least Washington, was able to punch in a number of big-time defensive backs. Kevin King was a second-round pick. Byron Murphy, who, lengthy cornerbacks is exactly what he's gone after. That's exactly what Texas has stockpiled as well. And you look at what Taylor Rapp has done as a safety. That's a really impressive resume in terms of guys brought in, developed, and then sent out to the NFL. That's one name that I think I'm kind of set on is where is he now? And well, you look at where he was. He is the defensive coordinator in that defensive staff with the Falcons. No longer there. He's a free agent. So we'll see, of course, if his name is called. But that connection with Pete Kwiatkowski is interesting to me. Jeff, who's top of mind for you outside of Coach Akina and Coach Lake, if there are anybody there?
Yeah, if there's one thing we've learned about Sark's hires, it's probably going to be nobody that we're talking about right now.
That's a great
typically he goes and does his own thing. And like Rod said, you've got plenty of examples, whether it's Tashard Choice or Chris Jackson or Kenny Baker, plenty of examples to show that it works. The only exception to that was I think we had a pretty good idea Johnny Nansen was going to be the linebackers coach hire. And there was some, with the Arizona coaching changes to go out to play out, but we eventually got to that point. But I got 3 names I want to throw at you. Okay. First is Keith Hayward. He's the defensive coordinator at Oregon State. He was the DB's coach for Sark, both at Washington and USC. 45 years old. Keith Hayward's still a young guy, got a lot of ties to the West Coast. So that's a name to maybe file away. Number 2, a guy Sark worked with at Alabama, Carl Scott. Right now, he is the defensive backs coach and the defensive passing game coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks. He was the corners coach at Alabama the last 2 years. Sark was at Alabama. So, and again, a young guy, a Houston native, played college football at McMurray, so he's got ties to the state of Texas, and he's 39 years old. You're getting a young, hungry coach. Maybe you want some, Blake Gideon kind of gave you some of that youthful exuberance on your staff. Maybe you want to bring some of that into the room. So there's 2. And the third one, not a tie to Sark, but a tie to the University of Texas. If you can't get Dwayne Akina, why not get a guy that was a graduate assistant for him? So I think if you pulled aside Ephraim Banda, who's now the safeties coach of the Cleveland Browns, he'd probably tell you the 2 coaches he learned the most from were Manny Diaz and Dwayne Akina. He was with Manny Diaz at Miami, was a defensive coordinator at Utah State. He's been in the NFL with the Browns the last 2 years. Again, was a GA at Texas. He's from San Antonio, went to college at Incarnate Word. So those last 2 guys with Carl Scott and Ephraim Banda, you're talking about 2 guys with ties to the state of Texas. And again, young guys. You're getting young coaches to come in here. Rod, for me, I know we can talk about recruiting and other things, but I would look for maybe some youth but to replace the youth you lost with Blake Gideon. Or you could look at it the other way where, hey, with your defensive tackles coach and your safeties coach, you brought in, Bo Davis was a chiseled veteran. You replaced him with a youthful Kenny Baker. Maybe now you want a more experienced coach in that safeties room. Maybe that's where Dwayne Akina would make sense. And for Coach Akina to end your career kind of where you made your biggest mark at Texas,
right?
I would think for a lot of reasons that would appeal to him. And CJ just said it. You start looking around that safety room, Xavier Filsaime, Jonah Wilson, Zealous Hicks. Yeah, there's a lot to work with. There's a lot to like there. If I'm an assistant coach looking at that Texas safeties room, I'm pretty excited about the pieces I go in and start to work with.
Yep. No, you got one of the most talented rooms in the country. I mean, that safety room is loaded. You're going to look good. If you're just a half-decent coach, that room's going to make you look good. I mean, it really is. And that pass rush going to make you look good.
Right.
Like, this is a dream job for a young up-and-coming, well, any safeties coach. But to your point, Jeff, about a young up-and-coming guy, a lot of energy, I could see that too. There's no doubt about it. There's also, I'm sure there's going to be some buzz. Speaking of kind of West Coast guys with Texas ties, not necessarily to Sark. Brian Carrington has been jumping around. He's a cornerbacks coach now. I thought he was on offense. There's a nice coaching cornerbacks there at Arizona State. So he can coach different positions. Yeah, wild card. Just throwing it out there. That's a guy, that young guy. I mean, considered a rainmaker in recruiting, obviously.
Yeah.
That's kind of his calling card. But I mean, he wants to coach. I mean, that was clearly why he got out of the talent evaluation acquisition realm and got into coaching. He wants to coach. Just throwing it out there. Another Longhorn tie, but also been coaching safeties for a while. Van Malone. He always gets, his name always comes up. He's a K-State. I believe he's still at K-State. As their safeties coach, that always comes up. If you're looking for, this is now just, you want wild cards, and it's, you're just looking for big names. And I know he just got on, I think, with maybe the Bears. Al Harris was kind of a rising star and spent a little time, I believe, at FAMU, maybe something like that. So not totally opposed to it, but getting a guy from the NFL. I mean, that's obviously going to be tough, especially when I think he's got a pass game coordinator title. So just another couple of names. Any other wild cards, since we're just throwing out wild cards potentially, that you guys would be interested in or think Sark should take a look at potentially?
Yeah, one I'll go with is a guy that was on Sark's staff at Texas, and he actually ended up leaving to go with Jeff Choate to Nevada. Joey Thomas, while he was at Texas, got a lot of rave reviews as a teacher of the position, just teaching technique, and also what he did in recruiting. So that's a guy that I think to maybe file away. I think he fits the description of wild card, Rod. He was kind of a QC guy at Texas, and he goes and he's coaching. His official title at Nevada is the secondary coach and defensive pass game coordinator. So again, Joey Thomas is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if you hear his name. But again, I think to hire him, it'd be kind of a wild card. Again, a young guy, but a guy that I think CJ and I think you can attest this. A lot of people at Texas spoke really highly of him while he was on staff.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a guy, and Texas has done a great job of filling their GA roles, their student assistants very well. He was the one that when he left, it was kind of like, oh, that's a pretty significant loss. And so Texas has done a good job rebounding from that. I've got 2 questions for both of you, Rod. I'll start with you first. We got to dispel some of the comments that we're going to get in the chat. Rod Babers isn't going to put his hat in the ring for this job, right? We got to make sure that we're out in front of this.
Oh man, you know what? Hell, man, I would apply, but I got no shot at it. But who knows? You know what I mean? But no, I've got people obviously reached out on social media and said jokingly, I'm sure that Rod B should throw his name in his name in the ring. No, trust me, I don't qualify considering some of the candidates we just mentioned. But no, it's fun. I know Michael Huff's a guy that people think is former players who've been around the program and actually helping out, with the secondary. He's been there for a long time. I mean, he's been there for a while now. I know it's somebody you brought up, CJ. If there was a former player that might, jump into the mix, it'd probably be a guy like that.
Right.
But like I said, that's a full-time job that I don't know if Huff Daddy needs that. So that's a name to throw out.
Yeah, I'll throw one more name out there, guys. Just again, kind of in that Joey Thomas mold, a guy that went from kind of a QC analyst at Texas to a position coach. Henry Fernandez was a guy, again, that Sarks has spoken really highly of in the past. Was on the Texas staff through the 23 season, ended up at New Mexico State. He's the safeties coach at New Mexico State right now. So again, hey, Sark's going to kind of do his own thing. He marches to the beat of his own drum on these coaching hires. Joey Thomas and Henry Fernandez, I wouldn't completely write them off just because they've got a lot of familiarity with that room already.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, go ahead, CJ.
I was just going to add my final point. Look, Sark's done his own thing for each hire that he's had to fill in at the position groups, right? Kenny Baker, a bit of an unknown with the Dolphins, spent some time down in that Georgia area. It kind of came out of nowhere. When you have to replace a Bo Davis, a guy with as much, skin on the wall as he does, that's a tough thing to do. But I think, again, you give him the benefit of the doubt for finding Chris Jackson, inking a deal with Johnny Nance, and coming in and filling these roles. It's not easy, but so far it's hard to look at a position group and say, okay, they've gotten worse because of XYZ hire. And that to me is encouraging anytime a position like this opens up moving forward.
If you're just looking at obviously the best defenses and some of the best programs, poaching from those programs is always a good idea. Great coaches who made great hires. Ohio State's their safety secondary coach, Tim Walton, I believe, is a name that may come up. Georgia's safety coach, Travaris Robinson. I think he's relatively new there, but that's a name that could come up.
I'll say this about T-Rob, too. As long as Will Muschamp's tied to that Georgia program, those two are pretty much attached at the hip. So, hey, but Will Muschamp doesn't have a job right now, Rod. He's an analyst at Georgia. Maybe Sark makes that call. Nick Saban's not doing anything. He's a DB's coach. And they get Nick Saban off the game they set. I kid, I jest, but,
Hey.
You can finally buy that house down in Austin, come coach Texas. I mean, it's a little overdue, but.
Many years later, that house in Spanish Oaks is finally, the Sabans are finally occupying it.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I don't know how often Will Muschamp. I know he's been he's coached all over that defense, safeties. He's a safety. You know what? Package deal. Bring on Travaris. If you want, hey, both of y'all can come on. We'll take both of y'all. Y'all can both coach in the secondary. We'll do it. It's not limited amount of coaches now. We'll bring the whole crew. It's all good.
And plus, it doesn't hurt that for the fan base, Will Muschamp is one of the few departed coaches that I think this fan base would welcome back with open arms.
Yeah.
True.
And he did coach safeties there. At Georgia in 2022 and 2023, coaching safeties. That's another good name to bring up. It is. I mean, there are a bunch of names I'm sure that are going to come up as well. That obviously that have either ties to Sark or just up and coming fast risers in the coaching industry. And honestly, the truth is, Sark I'm sure has a really long list. And then if you're a coach like Sark, everybody's going to take that call. Everybody's going to take that call. That's the beautiful thing about coaching at Texas. Everybody will take the call. NFL DB coaches will take the call. Any college coach will take that call. They may not all necessarily, say yes, but they will take the call. All right. Sorry, go ahead, CJ.
The final thing, look, everybody's going to take the call because they just saw what happened with Coach Choice, and the Cowboys not want to pony up to pay what it took to get him away from Texas. If that's what these coaches are making at the University of Texas, that's the product they're putting on the field. Yeah, that list might be pretty long when it comes to guys putting their hat into the opportunity to come out and get interviewed by Sarkisian.
Then you got guys calling their agents, hey, I want to be in the running. I don't necessarily need the job, but I need my name mentioned with that job. That always helps. All right, let's mention a name that always helps us. That's Dr. Brett Robin, my former teammate, lifetime Longhorn Brett Robin, a former Longhorn running back, but now one of the great orthopedic specialists in Central Texas. So special thanks to Dr. Brett Robin at the Austin Orthopedic Institute for sponsoring our breaking news breakdown here. Dr. Robin, a former Longhorn running back, knows what it takes to stay in the game, and he's here for athletes of all ages, specializing in musculoskeletal health. Dr. Robin treats joint pain and injuries with a conservative approach first, but also offers advanced surgical options, including arthroscopic procedures, fracture management, and total joint replacements if necessary. With convenient offices in Austin, Georgetown, and Killeen, Dr. Robin is accepting new patients right now, in fact. So if you're looking for a top-notch orthopedic specialist, give Dr. Robin a call and don't hesitate. 512-856-1000. That's 512-856-1000. And get back to your active lifestyle and doing what you love, thanks to Dr. Brett Robin, your orthopedic specialist. All right. Thank you very much to Dr. Brett Robin. Thank you, guys. Any closing comments before we leave? Wild predictions, other maybe wild cards to throw out there. I think we covered a kind of wide range of names here, but any closing comments on the move that obviously will affect Texas? Blake Gideon hired as the new defensive coordinator for Georgia Tech, and now that leaves an opening for the Longhorn coaching staff.
I'll say this, Rod. Maybe, Blake is now in that rare group with David McWilliams, and maybe there's a couple others that I'm not remembering right now. To win a conference championship at Texas as a player, you've got that number on the wall, and then to come back and do it as an assistant coach to have that number on the wall, that's a really big thing. So you talk about the Blake Gideon legacy, it's pretty solidified at this point.
I love that.
I was going to go very much the same route. Look, Texas, when he came in, Texas was the 60th ranked passing defense. They ballooned all the way up to 105th in 2023, and he got some pressure on his back, flipped the switch, turned Texas into a top 10 passing defense, but also set up for the future by getting his guys on campus, going out, winning some big time recruiting battles, and setting up the future for whoever comes in to be hitting the ground running. And that's something I think Texas fans should be absolutely applauding and thankful for as he departs for that Georgia Tech job.
Yeah, Blake Gideon as a player, his legacy, I don't know why, was highly criticized, right? Longhorn fans were very critical of his legacy as a player. I have no idea why, because he was a fantastic player on the 40 acres. So 21-21, I always took up for Blake Gideon, my brother at DBU. But I think now coming back as a coach, he should have silenced all that negative noise about him, period, in terms of what he brought to the University of Texas and how the University of Texas benefited from just him being a dedicated lifetime Longhorn. So shout out to Blake Gideon, man. This is a congratulations, number one. But also I think we honor his legacy a little bit now, as now I think we will appreciate him just a little bit more. Okay. Thanks to you guys. Thanks to my man, Jeff. Thank you for joining us. Thank you as well, CJ. We appreciate all the knowledge and the nuggets. Thank you to Dr. Brett Robin as well for sponsoring our breaking news breakdown. And until next time, Hook 'em Horns.